63 participants have joined. Amita madam, shall we start or wait for a
Yes, yes,
couple of
yes.
minutes?
Yes,
Huh?
please start. Please start.
Okay. Okay, very good morning and welcome again, all the participants. Today we have two lectures. In the first session, we have a lecture that will be presented by Dr. Atufa Ali. Uh, First of all, I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Atufa, our colleague. Dr. Atufa completed her BSc in Fisheries Science from Coast K, Kashmir, and postgraduate studies in Fisheries Extension from ICAR CIFI, Mumbai. She qualified ARS in 2022, and she is currently working as a scientist at ICR IGFRI Regional Station, Srinagar. Dr. Atufa is specialized in agricultural extension. Her focus areas of work are community-based livelihoods, gendered value chain assessments, and ecosystem services of common property resources. She has earlier worked on science communication, scientometrics, social and economic vulnerability, and sustainable development of lake fisheries. She is a recipient of Dr. Hiralal Chaudhary and Shri B.N. Sharma gold medals, as well as ICR JRF during her MSc. She has attended trainings from various reputed institutions, and she has published several research articles, popular articles, book chapters, and has presented her work not only nationally but in various notable international conferences and symposia. Today, she will be delivering her lecture on the topic Blue-Green Integration, Synergies and Trade-offs between Wetland Ecosystem Services among different stakeholder groups. As this topic suggests, this is most probably a very new and but relevant topic for all of us, and this will help in understanding two different aspects of agriculture. That is, one is fishery science on one side, and agroforestry. She may correlate it with extension services or agricultural these aspects. I hope this will be very informative lecture for all of us, and I hope that all the participants will listen keenly. And at the end of this session, there will be a healthy discussion as well as interactive session with the speaker. So, Dr. Tufa, I welcome you, and please start your lecture.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, whether my screen is visible? Presentation, I mean.
Yes, yes, it is visible.
And am I audible?
Yes, please come closer to the mic.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everybody, and my title for today's presentation is Blue-Green Integration, Synergies and Trade-off between Wetland Ecosystem Services among different stakeholder groups. So I'll start with the introduction, some concepts about the ecosystem services, how it has evolved, and what we have used in our studies. That I'll be discussing a case of a wetland in which is of an international and national importance. And please stay tuned. And if you have queries, and we'll have that in the end. So ecosystem services, it is not something recent that has been in the news, but it has been it has been evolved since then. And according, there are various definitions given by different resource persons. They say, for example, according to the Barber, he says that ecosystem services are natural assets produced by environment and utilized by human. Means it is about 2012 that he has said about the, say, those which are tangible services that we derive from a resource. And according to the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment 2005, they say these are the benefits that people derive from the ecosystem. And for the sake of understanding, they have categorized it in the provisional service, regulatory service, cultural, and supporting services. In provisioning services, these are those services that in the form of the products that we obtain from any ecosystem, say as a food, timber, firewood, medicinal plants, or we have some medicines, mushrooms, whatever that is, and that goes into a market, or is exchanged as a barter, or is a commodity that comes in provisioning services. Then we have the regulatory services. These are the services, these are the benefits obtained from regulation of the ecosystem processes of that particular resource, say climate, disease, water regulation, water purification, pollination, or then when we go to the cultural services, every resource has some cultural that aspect linked with it. That is, the people value it in some in some way. For example, you might have heard about that tata pani. So many people go there, and then they feel that if we go there and take a bath in that all our no pain, it somehow subsides. There is some kind of that a spiritual connection, so that all those non-material benefits that we obtain from that ecosystem comes in the cultural category. In, for example, the spiritual, recreation, the aesthetics, it might vary with respect to people. Some may perceive it as a service, and some may perceive it as a disservice also. Maybe in the form of the the people that they make a sense of some place. No, it might not be good to some people, but it might be very having a higher value to some other people. That means it varies with the perceptions. Then we have some broader classification of supporting services that a resource provides in the form of soil formation, nutrient cycling, and the like. So this ecosystem valuation, no, it has evolved over time. The people were initially focusing particularly on the providing services because they were tangible. However, that methodology-wise, also when over the time that the research advanced, this also evolved in that sense that people were initially doing partial economic valuation, say only the provisioning ecosystem services they were valuing. But now this cultural and regulatory and supporting services accounting, they are also gaining the momentum in today's aspect when we say so. The concept of total economic valuation evolved. That same thing, some categorize it in the form of the use values, some as direct values, some as indirect values. However, the crux is same: the services that a resource provides. And where from this interaction has come. See, when there is a service, say there is an harvesting of timber, somehow it has also related, we are relating it also with the deforestation. So there is some kind of an interaction that for the sake of understanding, the people have classified it as an interaction to study how the increase of one service has an effect or has an relation with the other service, whether is there a synergy, whether the increase of one service increases the service of another. For example, when we are installing a STP, okay, so it will have a water purification service. So then the pollution that it generates goes decreases. That means there is a synergy. It somehow, if we interfere with one of the service, what effect it has on another subsequent related service. So to understand that, these interactions are now in a discussion people study in terms of synergy and trade-off. Synergy, when there is a positive interaction, for example, when one intervention increases the service of another interaction. But also in some cases there are trade-offs also. The trade-offs means when there is a disagreement. For example, people are doing mining. So mining, and if we compare it with the afforestation, so those people know, if you are afforesting on that particular land, so there that people they will oppose. So there is a trade-off. So how to handle this or how to account this? This is the story of today's lecture. So these interactions nowadays is gaining momentum, has highly been studied by the researchers. And these interactions, it's not necessary they are tangible. They could be non-existent, positive, negative, unidirectional, and bidirectional as well. And this method of ecosystem analysis, no, they have also evolved. First of all, it depends upon the resource, the type of the resource you want to evaluate. It means that it's not only the natural resources, because there are many studies in which they have done ecosystem evaluation for an artificial lake, for an artificial reservoir, for an artificial water body as well, as long as it provides the service. That means a resource is important, but it should have an ecosystem thriving. Then only we say ecosystem accounting. So in that, what has happened based on the ecosystem service you want to evaluate, the evaluation methods also have been suggested by various researchers. It varies. For example, if you go with the wood-based energy and timber fuel wood, it has a market price. So we evaluate it based on the market price, and then value of the marketed and non-marketed products goes into the final value. So there are, for example, there are other various methods that have been evolved. Say it is a replacement cost method, or we have damage cost avoidance. For example, there is a flood somewhere and it has resulted in damage of say 10 rupees. Okay, so this 10 rupees, it is a cost that we are incurring, no, to get that compensation. So that kind of is a kind of an imputed value we can use for that flood service that it is providing. So that is a damage cost avoidance method. So accordingly, there are various methods that people are using, particularly this contingent valuation method, market pricing. People are using damage cost avoidance, and travel cost method also is quite popular to see that tourism aspect or tourism service that it provides. And then there are various studies that had been there over time on different, there are various studies on the wetlands, lakes, coastal reservoir, floodplains, even forests, even beals, oxbows, even ravines. There are a lot of studies, that people have evaluated this ecosystem nature partial, that is the secondary, but people have studied the nature of the ecosystem services that it provides using the various method. And then most of the studies particularly documented direct uses, and this assessment of trade-offs, synergies, it is now gaining momentum. And it also requires no consideration of the ecological. When we say the initial studies, they particularly focus on the ecological aspect, the type of the resource it is, and then ecology was in the main focus. Now this social and economic social factors are also playing a role and are being taken care of while computing this total economic valuation, because it is at the end, it is the people whom the things are going to be implemented, and without their consideration and without their consent, the project or that program is not going to be successful. So this was thought as an important consideration in assessment of these trade-offs. So here I'm here to discuss a case about this Wular wetland. It is an internationally important wetland because this Wular is one of the largest freshwater lake wetland in Asia and largest freshwater lake in Himalaya, which is around 13,000 hectare area. And then Wular provides the various services, like the fish production is one of the major services of the Wular lake. And not only that, the Wular also is important in terms of providing the flood protection, drinking water supply, irrigation, fish production, hydropower, biodiversity, tourism, aquatic vegetation. And this lake is only the basin in this entire Kashmir valley that acts as a sink for the four major rivers and three other lakes in the region. That is, it is the only thing in a large resource where everything gets dumped into at last. And this river is also important in terms of it is a transnational river that flows between India and Pakistan, and also is governed by Indus Water Treaty. So this is the fish species diversity of Wular. So in Wular, there is a one major important, provisioning service, that is a water chestnut, that we say as Singara in Hindi. It is known as a Singade, or in English, it is known as a water chestnut. And this forms or around 50% of the lake vegetation. So that's not only the thing, but a lot of women, they are involved in the harvesting of this water chestnut and in also marketing of this water chestnut. And this is a kind of in a same fisher household. The women go for fishing, women go for harvesting of water chestnut, and then this complexity within a household is only not only in occupational complexity is there, but also with respect to the season, it changes. So you can see that this green side on the left side, this is the summer water chestnut. It is entirely harvested by women, processed and even marketed also. It involves quite complex and involves a lot of energy, effort, and also they are doing it quite traditionally, even as now. And when it is sold, most of it, around 90% of it, goes outside the state. So there were certain research questions like who benefits from Wular wetland and how the share of the value from the ecosystem services differ by gender. Is it like that? Or what kind of trade-off synergies exist in Wular Lake, and which ecosystem service interventions are likely to contribute towards the well-being and empowerment? Some broader questions, and whether the evidence-based intervention planning is possible in Wular Lake or not. So our data sources, mostly secondary data, was used for computing the value. But for two provisioning services, we have used primary data as well from the fishers. And we had these three stakeholder groups like fishers, visitors, and expert groups were chosen. And fishers, it was particularly by face-to-face interviews using interview schedule. And for experts, we used web forms through email because it was convenient to attend from the expert side. So for fishers, this is the map of the Bullard Lake, and we have chosen these 9 villages for data collection purpose, covering the whole geography of the Bullard Lake, and also based on the intensity of the activity and greater number of the stakeholders present in these areas. So this is the result part where for the Fisher households, we found that in that 170 households, a total of umbrella of 1040 people lived there, and then the proportion of non-working categories was higher than the working categories in those households. And in that working category also, if we see that working category 493, majority were involved in harvesting of both fish and water chestnut. So we could found that the dependency ratio in these households was quite higher as compared to other states of this nation. So this was some so we could see that we did some gender thing, like how men and women in these categories of occupation differ in age, education, and income. And we could found that there were 8 groups that were significantly different in terms of age, education, and income. And young women and men were more specialized in occupation, and overall the women in fishing group had higher education, though not much, only sixth, I think sixth class was the average education among the whole groups. So this is the income distribution of all the sample households, of all the sample respondents. So we could see that overall, as expected, the men had a higher income as compared to women. But one good thing is that there were certain outliers that shown that even the income of those were comparable to men in total income. So, of saying about the visitors and experts, they were mostly, we had 30 visitors and 45 experts in sample. And in that education of the visitors, mostly were having schooling up to 10th, whereas those of experts, they were mostly postgraduates. And the profession of those experts were research scholars, students, and teachers, lecturers, professors, around 58%. And in occupation of visitors, we had an equal percentage of those working in government and had their own business, around 33%. So the first step followed in this ecosystem valuation, what we did, we had taken one kind of an not ideal, but that's suiting to our context with respect to wetland, one classification given by D. Groot 2010 in T framework, the economics of environment and biodiversity. He has given some classification, and we tried to, based on the secondary data, we tried to suit this classification to our resource. Accordingly, we classified how these provisioning services regulating kind of, we tailored it to Bullard Lake. So we could see that in food like fish, water, chestnut, lilambo, livestock, water birds, and agriculture, they were there. And similarly, we did for all provisioning regulatory, cultural, and habitat services. And we could found this raw material, for example. Yes. In this raw material, we could found that the reeds were used for mat preparation, and fiber, timber, willow, fuelwood, fodder, trapper shells as fuel were used. And in medicinal resources, it was also important with respect to the wild mushroom, Manchurian and Range. This is a local name, Swopal, hake, and Volcut vegetable, which is an of medicinal resources. We could see that it was not only important with respect to fisheries, but also was important having the other ecosystem resources services in place. So also there were some literature such as about the air quality, carbon sequestration, the flood prevention, groundwater recharge, pollination, and similarly for habitat services and cultural services. So because for example, in terms of the inspiration for culture, art, and design, so we try to define each ecosystem services to broaden our horizon, how we can further operationalize our methodology. So this secondary data we used and we compiled to suit each ecosystem service. Further, we asked the stakeholders that how important do you think is the contribution of Fuller in terms of these 22 ecosystem services. So they were asked to rank these ecosystem services, and further we performed the Kruskal-Wallis test since we had three groups of stakeholders and we had a rank data, so it suited our context and we wanted to see if there is a significant difference or not. So it is a this Kruskal-Wallis test is also known as one-way ANOVA of ranks, and it does not assume a normal distribution of the underlying data. So null hypothesis of Kruskal-Wallis test is that the mean ranks of the group were same. So we also try to do this total economic valuation where we have taken the 8 ecosystem services in terms of fish. This was from the primary data. This here I have given the gist. The total value was around 52.15 crore because we tried to see the seasonality also and seasonal wise also and species wise also we tried to analyze this data. And in water chestnut also there was some complexity with respect to the number of women and men involved in summer and winter seasons. So having those things in mind, we have computed that its total value was around 18 crore and 2 crore, though less in number, but in terms of involvement, it was quite high for women. So here we did some gender analysis also of Trapa ecosystem services, and we could say in terms of quantity, men were dominant around 84% harvested by them, and women harvested around 16.37, and in terms of value, around 10% contributed by women. And this was the overall gist of our study. That total economic valuation was around 2519 crore. We tried to evaluate certain 8 major ecosystem services provided by the lake. And based on the data availability and feasibility on ground, we have used these ecosystem services in computing the final output of this study. And we try to evaluate food, water, this raw material, water use, this carbon sequestration, flood prevention, and opportunities for recreation and education and research. And in among all these, we could see that around 87%, contributed by provisioning services alone in terms of value in INR, and followed by the cultural services and regulatory services. So there are a lot of research that differ that the perceptions this is this percentage it varies like across the different resources, that contribution of the certain provisioning and cultural is high in than provisioning also in certain studies. So coming to this stakeholder group analysis, we could found that we have done this for the fishers, experts, and visitors, and we could see among the education, the experts were on higher side, whereas the in terms of the age, the fishers were quite experienced, and with respect to the the experts, their age was comparatively younger, average age was younger than the fishers and visitors. So for trade-off analysis or synergy analysis, we could see that there were a significant difference among the perceptions of all the three host stakeholders with respect to provisioning services. But we could conclude that fishers had a high regards for provisioning services, at least for food, water, and raw material among other stakeholders, while as the experts had an higher regards for genetic resources, medicinal, and ornamental, whereas this visitors having the least regards for water and raw material. So we also saw this for regulatory services. We have seen that experts placing the more value on all the regulatory services, if you see, so than other groups for air quality, for which the visitors having the high regards, and least for water flow, erosion prevention, and soil fertility. So for fishers, it was almost same for all regulatory services. So for migratory species and gene pool protection, so we have seen that Wooler is an important wintering site for migratory birds. A lot of migratory birds visit this wetland, and we could see that experts having the high regards with respect to migratory and gene pool protection, and also fishers having somewhat in comparison to lower regards than habitat services. So for cultural services in terms of beauty tourism, art, spiritual, and education, we could see some synergy. Regarding cultural services, visitors having the high value on spiritual, experts with respect to education, and less on tourism, but fishers having the least for culture, art, spiritual, and education among all stakeholder groups. So this is the overall snapshot of the trade-off analysis and synergy analysis, how the perceptions vary. So we could see that this experts having overall high regards for on an average for provisioning regulatory and cultural services, and somewhat visitors having the least about the erosion, soil fertility, and water services. So these differences, no, they were significant for all provisioning, regulatory, and habitat flood services. But we have seen this flood control, no, it was no quite synergy within the within the regulatory services, because it happens like maybe the all the three stakeholder groups were quite aware about the flood control this service that Wular wetland is providing, because the flood that happened in 2014, no, that was in the mind of all the people, and even the local person, they all know, had there been not the Wular, the whole valley would have been destroyed, because it is the only thing that everything goes and gets dumped into it. So regarding the cultural services, there were no significant differences found for aesthetic beauty, tourism. And while some services relating to culture, spiritual, education, significant differences were identified. And among all, we could see that chi-square value was highest for culture and art, followed by education services. That is, we could see the perception thing. No, it varied greatly between the three groups. So this thing, now we could see also the synergy overall in all these ecosystem services. It was found with respect to aesthetic beauty, flood prevention, and tourism, where the differences of the perception were not significant. So we try to reason out this thing, why this is happening, but we could also know, we could also conclude that this, as the Vuller being a rural lake, is not that much explored if you see the in comparison with the Dal Lake. Maybe because there might be the reasons. The main important reason is that the Dal is located in the heart of Srinagar, no, and is important with respect to tourism, with respect to revenue generation. However, this lake, which is having a more, in my observation, more ecological value than Dal Lake, is means not ignored completely, but is not having getting that attention as it should be getting from the governance point of view. Although there is a Wular Conservation Management Authority that is taking care of the lake, but that they have a quite huge project of around, I think, 200 crore or so, more than that. And then they are now doing it, and they were mostly into the catchment conservation and dredging. So they were doing a lot of dredging. They have done, they have reclaimed lot of water where there was an agriculture land or some habitation. So they have kind of rejuvenated that part of the area, but there is something that is there on ground. And with respect to tourism, no, this Willard Lake is now gaining only attention, since this lake is not that it is in rural Kashmir. It's not in a prime location. However, there are chances like where that ecosystem services of this lake or wetland can be improved. The main suggestions from our study were that the STP should be given prime importance of being set up all around the lake to treat a lot of the influence of point and non-point pollution sources that goes into the lake. And then this lake is also and this as an important water, a source of drinking water for many villages, for most of the villages, fishing villages. So this water, no, it's untreated and it is not that clean. So, having said that, this study was taken up to highlight the value of the ruler. Though this value is not something that is the actual in real sense, because we also try to see the willingness to pay using the contingent valuation for the biodiversity. If the people are willing, overall, it was like people are willing. Even the governance also that is willing. But what was our main contention is involvement of the people, conducting the stakeholder group meetings from time to time, no, so that the management can be improved, and then in ground it will have some visibility. So that was about this study. So I wish to acknowledge the ICR CIFE authority for providing me with the funding sources to carry out this work. This is a part of my PhD work, and my major advisor, Dr. Ananthan PS, who is a principal scientist at ICR CIFE, and Wuller Lake stakeholders. Without those, the study would have not been possible and would have been incomplete, and the friends and well-wishers. And this is the fish market. It's quite fascinating, and it's to see that how that market is unorganized. It is kind of dispersed with least facility, I would say. And this is the interior of the Willard Lake, no, Zanlang. And so this is a storage of the fish, like how traditionally they are doing it. No, it's an indigenous technical knowledge that over the time that has been with them. And this is kind of, no, they may will make a temporary pond like situation inside the lake itself, and they'll store some excess catch, and then when they grow up, and then they will sold it at a better prices in the market. So this was about the presentation. This is an exhibit set up by Wuller Conservation and Management Authority. And thank you so much. If you have any queries, kindly we can take it up one by one.
Thank you, Dr. Atufa, for the enlightening and insightful talk.
Yeah, it took half an hour.
You defined very well from the basics, that is what exactly ecosystem services are and what different ecosystem services are provided. Then you also presented a case study of Wuller Lake in, I think, very much detail that could be very beneficial for all the participants. And based on your experience, you concluded that this Wuller Lake needs more attention and more exploration because of its higher and more ecological value, and it needs to be brought into more limelight, like you said about Dal Lake. Thank you very much for this insightful lecture. Now, this session is open for discussions. Participants are encouraged to ask their questions and raise inquiries if they have. Participants, please. Yes, Parul Sharga has raised hand. Please ask.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, very nice presentation, ma'am. It was very knowledgeable for me. Ma'am, first I want to ask, like, which kind of sampling you adapted for selecting respondents for your study?
We have used purposive sampling because our purpose was getting the sample from fishers, because they are the main stakeholders of the lake. Around low, there are 3,000 fishers. So based on it was purposive sampling based on the higher number of fishers present in the village, and based on the intensity, the quantity of the fish that and the harvest.
And second thing I wanted to ask, maybe many of the respondents might not have any knowledge about the particular ecosystem services. For example, I have also done similar kind of study, but in my study, most of the people were not aware about the soil erosion control or groundwater rejuvenation. So in your case also, respondents mentioned that they were not aware of the particular ecosystem services.
Yes, that is what is reflected in result. That's what we wanted to bring in, because if you see the education level of those people, no, they are primary level. But the thing, what was our main thing? No, we translated our questionnaire into the Kashmiri language. So we tried best, no, to get. But they were also experienced. I will not say if they are educated. They were not formally going to school, but there were people who were experienced. They know, yeah, these things are there: migratory birds, certain medicinal plants, even regulatory services also, no, of climate. So they have, but there were, yes, there is a variability, no, among the sample also. There were people that they were not aware about this ecosystem service that is there, no, and there is some technicality and some local we have to manage, no. So when you are speaking, first of all, you should be clear how it has to be told in your native language. That is also the major part.
So, ma'am, for scoring, you have given that particular service which is not known by the respondent. You have given scoring of 1 or 0.
No, I have given strongly disagree. Say one, for example. If they don't. One thing is like they don't know. Another thing is if we are giving an information that then it is their part. What they think, whether it is higher side or lower side. It doesn't, it doesn't have relation with their being unaware. But if they know this is a service that is there, say this groundwater recharge. Okay, so but ground when we say that is it important with respect to groundwater recharge? Like I don't know how to I wish to say in Kashmiri, but like they will say, yeah, it is important or it is not important based on their perception. That's why like it is a perception study. Doing, but there are studies they have done using economic aspects. See if there are like different projects, if they are favoring more cost benefit analysis, that is also one way of doing this trade-off analysis.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
No problem.
Any other questions, please? You can write your questions in the chat box, or you can directly ask our speaker. Anyone? So I think if there are no questions, we can conclude this session. We thank our speaker once again for joining us and delivering this talk. Can you please? There is one.
Yes. So this is in pipeline. I have not. It has not been published yet, but there are other studies that are there in trade-off. But this I'm going to like. It is in pipeline.
Dr. Atupa, you can also share your email ID or phone number with the
Yeah, I will
participants
write in text.
in case they need any queries or any further clarifications, they can contact you. So I think we will conclude this session here till we join the next session in the afternoon. Once again, thanks very much to all the participants for joining us, and have a nice and pleasant time. Thank you very much. Amida madam. Amida madam.
Thank you, everybody. Sir, we'll end the session. We have control it.
Huh?
Sir, can we end the session? Or?
Yes.
Oh, all participants have to join back in afternoon.
At 3.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. I think our host is busy somewhere, so all of you can just leave the call.